think we need a referendum on the EU as soon as possible. But the key issue is it should be a proper referendum, in or out.
David Cameron wants it to be later, doesn't he?
I'm not quite sure what David Cameron wants. I think the position is developing, but I think sooner or later it's going to have to be in or out, and I look forward to that.
When would you like to have it?
Today.
What, right now, this second?
This afternoon, if you've got convenient.
Look, I've just found a red ball. How did that get in there? Better not let anyone see that. Secretary of State, would you like to do our daily politics survey? Do you remember the days when you were on the daily politics every day?
I do, pretty much, yeah.
Good, so happy memories then. When should we have the EU referendum, now or later?
We've not had the chance to vote for several years, and give us the chance now.
Well, that was pretty frantic, wasn't it? But in the end, it looks like a small majority have sided with David Cameron and feel that now is not the time for an EU referendum. But it was pretty close.
Yes, not much in it there. Adam Fleming reporting. Well, let's talk now to the Conservative leader in the European Parliament, Richard Ashworth, and the Conservative backbencher who we saw in the film there, Mark Reckless, who last year helped instigate a vote in Parliament on whether to have a referendum on Europe. Mark Reckless, you want a referendum now and you want it on a substantive point, but David Cameron's ruled out an in-out referendum. What do you say to him?
I want a referendum sooner than later. And I think it's important that's a real referendum that gives people a choice as to whether they want to stay part of the EU, and that's what I want to see. So
yes.
Sooner rather than later, and a real referendum on EU membership.
But you're not going to get either of those, are you? I mean, David Cameron made it quite clear he doesn't want it on in-out, and he doesn't want it now.
Well, I think it has to give people the opportunity to choose whether or not we stay part of it. Whether the other side of that referendum is the status quo or something new with the Eurozone, or perhaps we've tried to get a few powers back. I think that question is open. But I don't think we can go into the next election saying, oh, well, we're going to try and persuade the other 26 countries to let us have a few powers back. And by the way, if you vote Conservative, we're going to take that as your full-throated consent to stay in the EU.
So David Cameron's making a mistake by not offering a substantive referendum before 2015?
Well, I don't think the policy is entirely clear at the moment. And
well, I think it is. I think it is. I mean, if you listen to David Cameron, he said, I think the trouble with a straight yes or no as we stand today is, frankly, I'm not happy with the status quo, so I don't want to say yes to that, but I also don't think it would be right to leave right now. So that's no referendum on in-out and no referendum sooner rather than later.
Well, I think as we go into the next election, and particularly the European election for Richard, I think we'll have to be much clearer about what our policy is. And I think, if David Cameron's able to go in there and try and get some powers back, if we can actually say to the civil service, by the way, the people are going to get a vote on whether we stay in on this basis, I think that will be a good incentive to actually go in, negotiate and try and get powers back for this country. But the key thing is ultimately the Conservative Party has to allow the people of Britain a choice as to whether we stay in the EU or whether we become an independent country again, trading with Europe, but governing ourselves.
Oh, Richard Ashworth, on that last point, do you agree with Mark Reckless? There has to be, at some stage, preferably before 2015, a referendum on whether we stay in or leave.
It's very difficult to determine the timing of a referendum and indeed the way that you will do it. But the Prime Minister was exactly right when he said, look, in November we've got some very critical negotiations about the 7-year budget. Coming shortly after that, we've got the negotiations for the 17 Eurozone countries to integrate more. Now, that's an opportunity for the United Kingdom to redefine our relationship. It would be wrong, therefore, for us to prejudice Britain's position going into those negotiations by having a very early referendum. But more to the point, you wouldn't know what kind of Europe and what kind of relationship with Europe you're describing to the British people without having that negotiation first.
So are you advising
not now and not in the form...
Right, are you advising David Cameron use his veto at those negotiations in November?
I'm pretty certain that he will. I'm on the Budget Committee myself, and there are some very big issues which the United Kingdom certainly can't agree to. Increasing the size of the budget, abolition of the British rebate. These are things we could never agree to, and I'm quite certain the veto will be used if they come up.
Are you saying also no to an in-out referendum?
It's not as easy as that.
Why not? Why not? Why isn't it?
Well, because the Prime Minister now has the opportunity to redefine Britain's relationship with the European Union. Actually, if you said to the people, do you want a trading relationship with a very important trading partners, which does not involve integration, actually gives us the opportunity to bring some powers back from Brussels, I think people would agree with that. That's certainly a position that I'd like to be.
Well, then, Mark Reckless, we need to wait, Richard Ashworth says. We need to know what we are going to be dealing with and what sort of Europe there is going to be before we have a referendum on what we don't know.
I mean, I think it's a fair point that Europe is in a state of flux. The important thing for me is once we've had those negotiations, that then the people get an opportunity to decide whether we want to stay in the EU on that basis, or whether we prefer a relationship more like that of Switzerland, where they sort of trade freely with the EU, but they're not part of the institutions. They're only paying a very small amount towards it, and frankly, their people can govern themselves. That's what I'd like to see.
Richard Ashworth, would you like Britain to be like Switzerland?
No, I wouldn't. Firstly, because Britain isn't like Switzerland. We're a bigger nation, we've got a different kind of economy, we play a bigger part in the world. So I'd like to have far more say in Europe than Switzerland does, for example. So I don't see the attraction of that. I don't see the attraction of a major manufacturing nation like Britain having to be like Norway or Switzerland, waiting to find what the regulations are that Brussels are imposing, and then having to apply them all to the letter, to the word, without any say.
Richard,
and also, may I say, making every bit as big a contribution to the funding of the European Union as we do as members.
Well, there you go, Mark Reckless.
Well, I mean, I think the Norwegian and Swiss contributions are significantly smaller than ours are. But two.
No, I'm sorry, they're not.
Well, I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sure we can go and look at the numbers after this.
Well, but
what I'd like to say is, in Switzerland, as in the United States or Japan, for instance, if you want to export to the EU, you have to meet EU regulations on your exports to the EU. But what they don't have to do is apply all those EU regulations to their exports outside the EU and to their own domestic economy. And I just think economically we could be so much better off if we weren't paying 19 billion a year for the privilege of having 26 other countries make our laws for us.
What do you say to that?
The gross cost is 19. That is the gross cost without the money that you get back, for example, to regional funding and to the common agricultural policy. So the net cost isn't anything like that. But the contribution per person is about the same as the contribution per person from Norway. Why else would the European Union allow somebody else to have a free ride? If Britain was to have a free ride, then the Poles and the Germans or the French would say, well, we'll have a free ride too.
Because they sell far more to us than we do to them, and they sell almost as much to Britain as they do to the United States and Japan put together.
Right,
it would be highly unusual for people who are selling that much to want to cut off perhaps their most important market.
But gentlemen,
well, the critical point of that argument is it is 50% of our trade, but to the whole of the European Union, we are 11% of their trade.
All right.
So you're hardly having an even debate.
Now, fascinating though this is about the economics of it, the politics is quite clearly demonstrated by the two of you that the issue would split the party. Do you want that, Mark Reckless?
Well, I think what we should do is just allow the people to decide on this absolutely crucial question for our country that no one under the age of 55 has had an opportunity to vote on.
Sure, but your party doesn't agree.
Or be independent.
But your party doesn't agree on that.
What I think we should do as a party is we should agree to offer people that vote to allow the people to decide, and then allow anyone within our party and outside to make their own arguments as to which side of that debate they want to be on.
And then
I think afterwards we come together just as these issues have been discussed in the past.
Right, and do you trust David Cameron?
I think that the real debate we should be having is that actually, under the Labour Party, Labour signed us up to the Lisbon Treaty. Labour signed up to about 100,000 pages of regulations. The British Conservative Party offers the British people the opportunity to redefine that relationship, get away from that regulation. That's where we are both joined together.
OK, gentlemen.
And my concern about Labour is what on earth happens to the Conservative Party if they offer a referendum on the EU and whether we stay part of it before we do.
Right, and thank you on that note, but that is exactly right. There is a risk that they could outflank you on this issue. Thank you both very much.